My family expects me to babysit for free all the time. Just because I'm single and have a flexible schedule doesn't mean I'm the default babysitter. My siblings drop their kids off without asking, and when I bring it up, they accuse me of being selfish. I still remember that unseasonably bright morning when I woke up with a heavy mix of anticipation and dread. A feeling so palpable, it almost made my coffee taste bitter. My name is Olivia, and at 31, I've learned that life isn't always as simple as it seems. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a lively suburb near a big Midwestern city, where the hum of traffic and distant laughter remind me that the world keeps turning, even when my heart is weighed down by familial expectations. I work as a freelance copywriter and graphic designer, a career I built on my creativity and relentless independence. I've always valued my freedom, and my flexible schedule has allowed me to chase my dreams and nurture my art. Yet in my family, that same flexibility is seen as an open invitation. For years, I've been the default babysitter. While my friends often brag about spontaneous adventures and carefree weekends, I've spent countless hours taking care of my younger siblings' kids, no matter the time or place. It's as if my family believes that because I'm single and available, I owe them my time without question. I can still recall one particular morning during a typical Sunday brunch at home. As my mom cheerfully rattled off plans for the day, my phone buzzed with yet another message. "Hey Liv, could you drop the kids off at the park before you head out? We're all tied up today." I hesitated, a pang of frustration mixing with resignation. I loved my family, but I was exhausted from constantly sacrificing my own plans. Not again, I thought, and the feeling of being taken for granted gnawed at me, an invisible weight I'd carried far too long. That day, after a routine drop-off at the park where my brother's children ran wild and carefree, I sat on a bench watching them play. Their laughter was infectious, yet every giggle reminded me of the many missed opportunities. Freelance gigs, long nights with friends, quiet moments alone to simply be me. I thought, why must I always be the babysitter? It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did, deeply. But I was tired of my boundaries being trampled and my time assumed to be theirs without even asking. As the day wore on, I replayed every instance where I'd been forced to cancel plans or put my own life on hold. In my mind, these memories formed a mosaic of sacrifice and silent resentment. I decided then that something had to change. I couldn't continue living in a cycle where my worth was measured solely by my availability to care for others. Deep down, a spark of defiance ignited, a promise to myself that I would reclaim my time, my dreams, and my identity. I knew that confronting this issue wouldn't be easy. Family is complicated, woven together by love, obligation, and history. But as I sipped my now cold coffee, I resolved that no longer would I allow my flexibility to be exploited. I would soon find a way to set boundaries, to say no without guilt, and to make it clear that my time was as valuable as anyone else's. And with that resolve, I braced myself for the storm that was about to upend the status quo. My earliest memories of being the helper are a blend of innocence and an unspoken burden. As a little girl, I was always the one sent off to keep my cousins entertained while my parents hosted family events. I remember being chosen as the designated babysitter at birthday parties, handpicked to watch over a room full of boisterous children while the adults mingled. Back then, I didn't understand why I was always the one. I just thought it was part of being the older sibling. Over time, however, I came to realize that these assignments weren't random acts of kindness, they were expectations. During high school, I often found myself sacrificing social events. While my friends stayed out late and celebrated their youth, I was dutifully running errands for my family or watching over my younger siblings during unsupervised gatherings. Each time I declined an invitation because someone needed me. A small seed of bitterness was planted deep within. I started jotting down these moments in a worn-out notebook, a private record of every instance I was treated as disposable labor, rather than a person with dreams of my own. One sweltering summer afternoon remains etched in my memory. It was my birthday, a day that should have been filled with celebration. Instead, as relatives gathered in our backyard, my older brother casually announced that I was the family babysitter again, expecting me to stay home and watch the little ones while everyone else enjoyed themselves. I watched the festivities from the window, tears stinging my eyes as I realized that my special day had been sacrificed once more on the altar of duty. The incident, small yet searing, confirmed what I had long suspected. My family saw my availability as an endless resource, never considering the toll it took on my aspirations and self-worth. Every instance added up: late nights spent soothing crying children, weekend plans canceled without explanation, and the constant subtle pressure to be helpful, no matter what. These moments, though varied and independent in their own right, wove together a tapestry of unrecognized sacrifice that defined my relationship with my family. I began to resent the idea that just because I was single and had a flexible schedule, I was obligated to be everyone's caregiver. The growing frustration was a quiet rebellion, a simmering anger that urged me to reclaim control over my own time. Then came a day that crystallized everything. I had been looking forward to a major project pitch at work, an opportunity that could catapult my freelance career into new heights. I meticulously prepared for weeks, fine-tuning every detail and rehearsing my presentation until it felt like second nature. On the morning of the pitch, I woke up with a burst of inspiration and excitement, determined to seize the day. That's when the call came. A frantic message from my sister, asking if I could come over immediately because she had forgotten to arrange childcare for her 2 kids. At first, I hesitated. I had a job interview that could change my career trajectory, but my family's expectations loomed large. I tried to negotiate. "Can't someone else handle this?" But the response was swift and dismissive. "You're always the one, Liv. We know you're available." My heart sank as I realized I was forced to choose between my professional dreams and the perpetual role they assigned me. In a flurry of panic and desperation, I rushed to my sister's house. The chaos was overwhelming. Screaming children, frazzled parents, and the feeling that my entire day was being hijacked. I missed my pitch, my chance at a breakthrough, all because I was expected to drop everything and babysit. As I sat on the living room floor amidst scattered toys and frantic apologies, I felt a profound sense of injustice. Every minute lost was a minute of my future slipping away, a minute that I could never get back. That incident was the final straw. I returned home in a daze, anger and sorrow swirling in equal measure. In the solitude of my room, I opened my old notebook and reread every note, every memory of being exploited for my time. The cumulative pain was overwhelming. I scribbled furiously. "I'm done being taken for granted. My time is not free, and my dreams deserve respect." With each word, a quiet determination grew within me, a promise that I would no longer let my family's expectations rob me of my future. In the days following that disastrous incident, I began strategizing. I realized that if I was to break this cycle, I needed to set clear boundaries and assert my worth unapologetically. I started by reaching out to a dear friend, Michelle, who had always encouraged me to prioritize my well-being. Over long walks and midnight coffee sessions at our favorite cafe, we brainstormed ways to communicate my feelings effectively, without burning bridges. "You have every right to say no," she insisted, sharing her own story of standing up to familial obligations. Her words lit a fire in me, a belief that I could reshape the narrative. I decided that the upcoming family reunion would be the perfect stage for this change. I meticulously drafted a list of all the times I'd been sidelined, noting each instance with precise details and dates. I practiced what I would say, determined to be calm, honest, and firm. I wanted them to understand that this wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the culmination of years of compromise and silent suffering. I also began exploring ways to reclaim my time professionally. I reevaluated my schedule, setting aside dedicated hours for work and personal pursuits. I even reached out to potential clients who admired my portfolio, reinforcing my commitment to a career that celebrated my creativity instead of stifling it with endless babysitting. Each new plan and every small victory felt like a rebellion, a reclaiming of a life that had been overshadowed by unasked-for obligations. By the end of that week, my resolve was unshakable. I was prepared to confront my family at the reunion, to say no more. I wasn't interested in creating conflict for its own sake, but I was determined to stand up for myself. The thought of explaining, in clear and unwavering terms, that my time was valuable and that I deserved to live a life centered around my dreams, filled me with both fear and exhilaration. I closed my notebook, took a deep breath, and promised myself that at the reunion, I would finally demand the respect I had long been denied. The family reunion was held on a warm, breezy afternoon at my parents' large old house, a place steeped in decades of tradition and unspoken expectations. The garden was adorned with festive decorations, and familiar faces gathered, chatting amiably under the soft glow of string lights. Yet beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension was palpable. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I rehearsed my opening lines in my head. Today was the day I would finally say what needed to be said. As we sat down for a lavish lunch, the conversation flowed from nostalgic family stories to the mundane details of everyday life. I tried to maintain my composure, but when my younger brother casually announced that he had dropped off his kids at my house without even asking, I felt my blood boil. I looked around and saw others shrugging it off as if it were perfectly normal. That was it. I had endured this exploitation for far too long. I cleared my throat and, with trembling determination, stood up. "I have something important to say," I began, my voice firm yet laced with emotion. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward me, some curious, others wary. I recounted, in unflinching detail, the countless times I had been expected to babysit without any regard for my own plans, missed deadlines, lost opportunities, and the constant sacrifice of my personal time. "I love my family," I continued, "but my time, my dreams, and my well-being are not infinite resources to be exploited." I spoke with clarity and passion, each word a release of years of pent-up frustration. A hush descended over the room as I laid out my new boundaries. From now on, if anyone needed childcare, they had to ask and be willing to compensate me for my time. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see a mixture of shock, guilt, and anger in the faces around me. My father's eyes glistened with tears, and my mother's expression turned conflicted. A cousin, whose tone had always been light, muttered, "That's harsh, Liv." But I pressed on. "I'm not being harsh, I'm being honest. I deserve respect, and I won't sacrifice my future for your convenience any longer." As the words left my lips, the room erupted in a chaotic mix of whispers, shouts, and even a few supportive nods. The confrontation had reached its peak. I locked eyes with my dad, silently asking, "Do you understand?" His silence, heavy with conflicting emotion, was answer enough. For a long, tense moment, time seemed to stand still, as if every member of the family was forced to confront the reality of my declaration. In the hours following my speech, the atmosphere of the reunion transformed from cordiality to chaos. Family members who had once taken my contributions for granted now argued amongst themselves. In one corner, my sister pleaded for leniency, insisting that I was overreacting. In another, my uncle defended the old ways, grumbling that babysitting is a family duty. I wandered through the house, absorbing every whispered comment, every tearful apology, and every resentful glare. It was a maelstrom of emotion, a public reckoning that left no one untouched. I retreated to a quiet room, where I allowed myself a few moments to process the storm. I felt a mix of relief at finally speaking my truth and a deep sadness for the fractures that were now apparent in our family. My phone buzzed with supportive messages from close friends who told me how proud they were of my courage. Yet, every supportive word was tempered by the bitter taste of inevitable fallout. I knew that change would be painful, and some relationships might never mend completely. Later that evening, during a hushed family meeting in the parlor, a trusted relative, a soft-spoken aunt who had always been sympathetic, stepped forward. "Olivia," she said gently, "I always admired your strength. Perhaps it's time we all learn to value your time and respect your boundaries." Her words, sincere and unprompted, sparked a ripple of introspection among a few others. Still, the room remained divided. My father, looking older than ever, apologized in a wavering voice for not recognizing my sacrifices sooner. Yet, even as some members began to soften, others clung to the old ways with bitter indignation. The emotional fallout was not confined to the reunion. In the following days, I found myself fielding calls and texts, some conciliatory, others critical. I received a particularly moving message from a cousin who admitted that she, too, had grown weary of taking my generosity for granted. "I'm sorry we never appreciated you," it read, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps, over time, true change could begin. In the aftermath of the explosive reunion, I faced a critical crossroad. I spent long nights in solitude, grappling with the pain of fractured family ties and the liberating taste of self-respect. Each sleepless hour brought new clarity. I could no longer let my family's expectations dictate my future. I had to set boundaries that were non-negotiable, even if it meant risking further alienation. One particularly quiet night, I sat by the window of my apartment and stared at the city lights. I recalled every moment I had sacrificed, every opportunity missed because I was expected to be always available. I wrote furiously in my journal, each word a testament to my resolve. I am not your free babysitter. I penned, I am a woman with dreams, ambitions, and a life that deserves to be lived on my own terms. With each stroke of the pen, the old chains began to break away. The next morning, I made my decision. I called each sibling individually, calmly and firmly reiterating that from now on, if they needed childcare, they had to ask. No exceptions, no free rides. Some were apologetic, others dismissive, but I remained unwavering. I also made it clear that if the unspoken rule continued, I would have to reconsider my involvement in family gatherings altogether. This was not an act of rebellion for its own sake, but a necessary assertion of my self-worth. That day, as I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't sure if the wounds of the past would fully heal, but I knew that I had taken the first bold step toward reclaiming my identity. I had spoken my truth, and though the fallout was painful, I was finally free. The decision was irreversible, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where my time, my energy, and my dreams were mine to cherish, not a resource to be exploited. In the months that followed, I dedicated myself to rebuilding a life that honored my worth. I immersed myself in projects that sparked joy. Freelance gigs that allowed me to work on creative assignments without interruption. Art classes that rekindled my passion for painting. And weekend outings with friends who truly valued my company. I even started taking on paid babysitting gigs, not out of obligation but as a choice, which allowed me to set my own terms and be compensated for my time. Each new experience was a small victory, a reaffirmation that I could dictate the terms of my life. I began attending therapy, where I learned to process the long-buried resentment and the mixed emotions of love and betrayal. In a series of candid sessions, I uncovered how the weight of others' expectations had stifled my creativity and dimmed my self-worth. My therapist encouraged me to celebrate my successes, no matter how small, and to honor the boundaries I had so bravely established at the reunion. Slowly, I found that the pain was giving way to a quiet sense of empowerment, a realization that I was more than the sum of my sacrifices. As the seasons changed, so did my world. Professionally, my freelance career flourished. I secured new clients who admired not only my talent, but also my boldness in standing up for myself. I even landed a coveted project with a well-known brand, a testament to my resilience and my refusal to be pigeonholed as just the family babysitter. Each milestone, whether it was a glowing client testimonial or a feature in an industry blog, reinforced that I was on the right path. My family, too, began to adjust to the new order, albeit slowly. At subsequent gatherings, I noticed subtle shifts. A sibling now asked if I needed help before dropping off their kids, and a cousin, once known for her sharp remarks, offered a tentative apology for never respecting my time. While old habits die hard, and the awkward tension never fully vanished, these small gestures signaled a gradual evolution in our relationships. I learned to forgive, not for their sake, but to free myself from the lingering bitterness that had once defined me. One chilly evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my apartment, a gathering of friends who had supported me through every twist and turn. As we sat around a table, lit by the soft glow of candles, I shared my journey, the long years of being taken for granted, the explosive confrontation at the reunion, and the difficult, liberating decision to put my own happiness first. Their eyes shone with admiration and empathy, and in that moment, I realized that my story was not one of victimhood but of empowerment. I was no longer the quiet girl whose time was assumed to be free. I had become a woman who stood up for herself and forged a future on her own terms. On a serene night 1 month later, as I walked along a tree-lined street, the crisp air filled with the scent of autumn leaves, I paused and reflected. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I celebrate the freedom to be exactly who I am, a woman who values her time, her dreams, and her own happiness above all else." Those words, simple yet profound, encapsulated my journey from endless sacrifice to the reclamation of my identity. Looking back, I see that every moment of frustration, every instance of being taken for granted, was a stepping stone to this new life. I am not defined by the expectations of others. I define my own destiny. My time is precious, my dreams are valid, and I will never again allow anyone to assume that I must always be the default babysitter. I have embraced a future where my choices are respected, where my contributions are valued, and where I am free to live a life filled with creativity, joy, and unapologetic self-respect.